The cruiser slammed into the mailbox with a thunderous crack, its hood buckling like paper. The officer stumbled out, clutching his head in disbelief, while the old rancher stood calm, silent, and unshaken. His words, soft but sharp as steel, cut through the air. "You messed with the wrong one, kid." Asterisk, the blacktop shimmered under the Texas sun, a quiet rural road stretching endlessly across farmland. For weeks, it had been a battlefield no one spoke about. The rancher's mailbox, simple, sturdy, and ordinary, had been struck down time and time again by police cruisers from the local HOA enforcement patrol. Some said it was an accident. Others whispered it wasn't. But to the man who owned that land, it felt personal. He was not a man who spoke much. His neighbors knew him as Elijah, a quiet veteran who carried himself with the weight of years in service. He had fought wars far from home, walked through deserts where the air itself tasted of dust and fire, and buried comrades whose names he still spoke softly under the stars. To him, respect was sacred. It wasn't just about a mailbox. It was about dignity, something that should never be trampled. Every morning, Elijah rebuilt what was broken. Wood splinters in his calloused hands, fresh paint brushed on steel, bolts driven into the earth like promises. And every week, the mailbox was destroyed again, shattered by speeding cruisers, crushed under wheels, left in ruins as if it were nothing. Neighbors saw, some shook their heads in silence, others looked away. No one challenged the uniformed men who laughed as they passed. To stand against authority, even when it was wrong, carried a cost few were willing to pay. But Elijah was different. He had already paid in blood and sacrifice. He had already lost more than most could imagine, and so he remained silent, rebuilding, day after day, week after week. His silence was not weakness, it was warning. Then came the day when silence ended. The patrol car roared down the road once more, its siren quiet but its speed reckless. The young officer behind the wheel smirked, his eyes fixed on the mailbox as if it were a target. But when the cruiser struck this time, the impact did not bend wood or tear steel. Instead, it recoiled as though hitting an immovable wall. The hood folded, glass shattered, and smoke hissed into the air. The mailbox stood untouched, solid, unyielding, that Elijah had built it from reinforced steel, rooted deep in concrete. It wasn't a trap, it wasn't a trick, it was simply built to last, something stronger than arrogance, something that could not be bullied. The officer stumbled out, clutching his head, staring in disbelief at the wreckage. His authority, his pride, his car crumpled in seconds. And across the road, Elijah stood, with hands on his hips, hat shading his steady eyes, his voice calm and even carried across the silence of the field. You can break a man's things 100 times, but you will never break the man himself. It was not anger in his words, it was truth. Behind Elijah's stillness lay years of sacrifice. He remembered the weight of his pack in the desert heat, the letters he never got to send, the sound of his friend's last breath carried away on foreign wind. He remembered returning home, invisible to those who had never seen war. Respect was not a luxury to him, it was survival. And here, in the middle of nowhere, a mailbox had become the battleground of respect. The neighbors began to gather, drawn by the crash. They saw the wrecked cruiser, the officer holding his head in shame, and the rancher standing calm and unshaken. Whispers rose among them, no longer silent, no longer complicit. For the first time, they spoke aloud what they had seen for months. The story spread, not as gossip, but as testimony. The quiet veteran, harassed and disrespected, had answered without violence, without anger, only with silent strength. The officer filed his report, but no charges could be made. The mailbox was perfectly legal, stronger than most, yes, but legal. Built to last, built to endure, built to teach. And so the power shifted. What had once been laughter at a man's expense became a lesson carved in steel. No patrol car dared touch it again. No officer dared mock what they could not break. Elijah's words lingered, like scripture among the community. Respect is not demanded by a badge. It is earned by how you treat others. You can try to crush a man's walls, but his foundation will always stand taller. In the weeks that followed, the mailbox became more than steel and concrete. It became a symbol of silent resistance, a reminder that dignity cannot be destroyed by disrespect. Children on bikes slowed to look at it, whispering stories they had heard from their parents. Neighbors, once quiet, began waving more often, their gestures carrying the weight of unspoken apology and solidarity. And Elijah, as always, stood quietly at his fence line, hat tipped low, eyes steady on the horizon. The victory was not in humiliating the officer. It was not in the crash or the wreck. The victory was in silence, in honor, in showing the world that strength does not need to shout. And in that silence, Elijah reminded everyone of a truth too often forgotten. The strongest battles are fought not with weapons or words, but with the quiet courage to stand unbroken. Respect, dignity, silent strength. These are the foundations that hold communities together. Elijah's story is not about revenge, but about resilience. It is about a man who had already given everything and refused to let anyone take his honor. Wherever you are watching from, take a moment to reflect. What would you stand silently for? What foundation in your life cannot be broken? Share your thoughts below, and let us know where you're watching from. If this story moved you, subscribe for more stories that honor those who fight their quiet battles every day, because sometimes the strongest voice is silence.